So now that I'm married and I'm Catholic and I don't want to use contraception, what am I supposed to do? Have 20 kids or have a kid every single year? Big families are beautiful, but not everybody is called to have a child every year. Growing up as a young girl, I was always told if you're going to have safe sex, and that means don't get STDs and definitely don't get pregnant. And I thought that contraception was my only option. That's what I was told, and doctors were handing them out left and right. And so for 5 years I was on birth control pills until I started doing some research of my own, started learning more about my body, and I realized that this is really harmful for me. And there's got to be something much better out there, something that's natural, something that's healthy. And as I started learning more about the Catholic Church, I learned about natural family planning.
Back in the book of Genesis, God's first commandment to Adam and Eve is really simple. Bear fruit and multiply, aka have sex and have babies now. Adam must have been standing there going, "Sir, yes sir, we will obey, let's go Eve, let's do this." So obviously the church is not afraid of talking about the whole thing of sex, but also babies. We know that marriage is a sacrament. It's supposed to be unitive and procreative, meaning that the couple literally comes together in spirit and body in the gift of sex, but also they have to be open to the gift of life. And we know that, obviously, sex equals babies, just in case you didn't know. Now, natural family planning has been extremely helpful for me as a man because I realized that my body is far less complicated than a woman's body. It's made me sensitive to the fact that I have to understand where my wife is coming from, how her body works, how that there's a cycle that happens every single month, where there's a point in time where my wife is fertile and able to conceive a child, and then the rest of the month where she's not. And so it's really cool in that as a couple we realize that marriage is just not a constant let's have sex all the time because that's the only way we show love. But in reality it's challenged me to understand that sex is something that we need to communicate about, that it's an expression that's profound in our relationship, but we as a couple have to, with God, truly plan parenthood in the sense that we need to consider, are we open to having life? Are we open to conceiving right now? Are we physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially ready to bring life into the world? And that's part of the conversation piece that is extremely helpful with natural family planning. Whereas contraception, you just kind of pop a pill and you go. And it doesn't always necessitate that place where both the husband and the wife can express, where are we at, honey? Are we ready for this?
As a wife, it's great to know that my husband respects me enough to get to know my body and to get to know me and to have these difficult conversations with me, because it's not just my duty to be available for sex whenever he wants it, and it's not just my responsibility to plan for our family, but this is something that we can do together.
Yeah, it's not like I'm gonna be a caveman. Hey, honey, give me sex now. Kids, not right now, no, not good. Right, I mean, I have to be very sensitive and in tune to my wife as a husband, you know, where I realize that our marriage is not just about having sex nonstop. How exhausting would that be? No. Love demands sacrifice. Love demands communication. Sex is only the tip of the iceberg. What is your relationship built upon? The movies have us convinced that marriage and relationships is just about having sex, but no, there's so much more to that. There's so much more of me needing to communicate love to my wife, far more than in just the physical. So for instance, physical is one component, but then there's spiritual. Are we praying together? Do I know where my wife is at emotionally? What's going on in her world? Am I sharing with her and receiving from her intellectually? Are we like developing memories and thoughts and conversations? There's so many ways that we need to express love to one another, not just in the bedroom or not just physically. And so that's been really helpful for me as a man. Surprisingly, studies have shown that couples who use NFP, their divorce rate is far and significantly less than most of the society who is using contraception. Now, why would that be? Well, part of natural family planning, and my wife will tell you more, is that there is a time in the month, usually it's about a week, give and take, where a woman is fertile. So for instance, if me as a husband and my wife as a wife, we decide together that, for whatever reasons, be they, as we said before, physically, emotionally, financially, etc., we pray and discern that it's not the right time to have a baby, well then during that month, that period of the month where my wife is fertile, we have to abstain from sex. Now that might sound a little bit crazy, and it can feel a little bit crazy, but there's a benefit to that. Whereas it's just really simple. It's like the analogy of, Halloween's amazing because you get to eat 4 pounds of candy overnight. But if you were to eat that much candy every single day of the year, it really wouldn't be that special. And so there's this thing with human nature that when we can abstain from something like sex, but come back to it, there's a renewed honeymoon effect, which is extremely beneficial. And it requires discipline, it requires sacrifice, but it's all that more special because it trains us to remember that we're not just using each other physically, but we're learning how to be sensitive, to love one another, to sacrifice, and that's what marriage is about. That's what it needs to be built on.
Practically speaking, how does NFP work? Well, there are a number of different methods out there, but essentially a woman would be tracking physical signs and using a charting system so that she can determine when she's fertile, when she's not fertile. And even on an emotional level, she can know, when am I going to be more irritable this time of the month? Or when do I need a little bit more loving from my husband?
More chocolates, more massages.
More flowers.
Or that.
And what's great about NFP is that it works for all women, women who have regular cycles or irregular cycles, women with fertility issues. And the thing with contraception is that it kind of masks all those things, but with natural family planning, you're more in tune with your body. And for me personally, I didn't know I had a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. And it's a very common condition that a lot of women have, and it affects their fertility, affects their cycles, and it makes it a little bit harder to conceive a child. And so with NFP, we were able to work around that.
Yeah, and it was such a blessing because being aware of this condition, we went to a doctor who specializes in infertility and is a NAPRO specialist, and she was able to help Maggie and myself understand the situation, get us on some supplements and things like that to take care of her health. And lo and behold, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have conceived our first daughter, Audrey. And so Audrey is a little bit of a miracle because had we been unaware of that, she would have probably just been miscarried at the time. And so being aware through natural family planning of this condition, there's so many benefits. It really is incredible. Guys, we're going to be real with you. We're going to speak from the heart. NFP takes work. It's not a cakewalk. It's not a walk in the park. It really is difficult at times, but the blessings, the benefits are so rewarding. Now, for instance, when my wife is fertile and we're talking about it and we come to the agreement that we're not ready to have a child right now, well then we have to learn how to love each other in non-sexual ways. There have been so many times where we want to make love, but then we have to have this conversation and say, not the time. And so that's when I, as a husband, and my wife, we have to learn how to speak that love language in ways that cover the other points, like for instance, in ways that are intellectual, communicative, emotional, spiritual. That really is so foundational because it doesn't turn my wife into an object where I just use her, but I learn how to reverence her as my wife, as my bride. And as we know, love is so much more than just the sexual intimacy part. What I love too about natural family planning is it really acknowledges that ultimately God is the creator. He's the author of love, He's the author of life. Contraception essentially says, you know what, God? No, 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 no. Whereas NFP says, we're going to take this attitude that in the event that God, you want us to have a child, we're going to have a child. And so there's this natural element though where nothing artificial is being introduced, and we're saying to God, you are the author, you are the creator, and if you want us to have a child, even when we're using or having sex in a time where she's quote-unquote not fertile, we're still open to that act of life. And the truth is, there's a real freedom in that because we're acknowledging that though we as Spouses and as parents are being responsible to the degree that we can. We're trusting in you, God. We trust that you are the author, that you have a purpose for our lives and our future children, and we're going to do our best to be faithful to that.